Alright, so now we will talk some covering. So this part will be about facer covering, shoulder covering, high posture, and low posture. And Felix will help me out in some sequences. And we will start with facer and shoulders. So basically when you hold facers, you can hold it more or less however you want to. We don't have the hand sensor on. However, 2 hands at all times, just saying. At no time may you put your hand or fingers over this part, like this, you're not allowed to touch it at all, okay? You may, graze it a little bit, but you can't have like a static hold, which is, there are so many different ways. I'm not good at doing that, but I know some people can. So no hands over this part, right? And also this, not allowed. You cannot like tuck the weapon against your stomach or anything like that. So that is basically weapon covering. You're allowed to put your facer behind the wall like that when you're behind the wall. That's fine. Shoulders, we hardly ever ref shoulders. There's mainly 2 situations. It's when you hold high. You're not allowed to lock like this. We call it chin lock. You see, I connect here, so that goes as covering shoulders. And the same goes when holding low, when you hold like this, and you connect like that. And this is like a static movement. If you just look this way and just touch it, it's fine. Like if you touch the fabric or the sensor, if it's just like that, then it's fine. As long as it's not used as a dodge or anything like that. So just keep in mind, you cannot touch fabric, you cannot never touch plastic. That goes for all sensors, more or less. You can never touch the plastics of any sensor. So that would be facer and shoulders. Most covering is always about back and chest. So we will talk high posture. Felix will now demonstrate how to play the high posture in a correct manner. When you play high posture, your arm must be above the chest sensor. Your front elbow can never drop down, covering your front chest. This can happen like on a rare occasion when you correct your glasses or you do something like your arm might come down, but you cannot walk around like this statically in the arena. This is also very important when you look around corners. So a lot of players hold correctly, but when they look around corners, they will do this, which is illegal. It's something to look out for. It's the most common way of breaking this rule. So when playing the low posture, your weapon is below the chest sensor. This is a very common way to play when you play your correct side, so to speak, which this is. When you play low, it's important that this forearm doesn't go across here unless you are doing a transition, which we'll explain later. So when you shoot, you cannot shoot like this. As you see, my arm comes across. You can bring your arm a little bit forward like this, if you can still see my sensor here. Like to do some shots and stuff, like it's good, I think. But you cannot go all the way here. When people play walls, you will often see them hanging by the wall like this, and then it's really important as a referee to make sure that they're not standing like this. This can also be done when tucking into corners, guarding bases, or whatnot. And some nice tips to know if players are actually in front with their arm is if they have straight arms. If your arms are straight, you will always be covering unless they're only holding with one hand. Then you can of course do like this. It's a very uncommon thing, but it could be done in theory. But if you hold with 2 hands with straight arms, it's almost always covering. Like I could in theory stand, like you see my arms aren't even straight anymore. So straight arms, and also where your facer is. You see when I move my facer, you see a lot of players putting the facer on their hip like this, and when I do that, my arms comes across. So if you see players guarding a wall like this, facer on their hip, it's very often covering, unless they're only holding with one hand doing like this, then it's fine. And as you can see, when you turn, the arm can still be in the way when you turn, but as long as it's tucked into your body like this, it's fine. So in theory, the arm can block the shot, but if it's connected to your body like this, it's all good. So the thought is, when you turn, if you hold correctly, your back will come up, right? So if I turn my chest away, my back can be seen. But if I cheat, I don't give my back, and I actually don't really give anything to the opponent. Okay, so when you play reverse, that's not like your good side, it's your offhand side, so to speak. There are a few ways to play it, firstly. I will go through the two most common ones. First one is when you play it like this. Most people play it like this way. And then you have what we call the reverse flip, that looks like this. Those are the most common ones. There are probably some I don't know about, but I can't tell you because I don't know about them, right? So when you have people playing like this, you have a lot of these shots, which is fine, you see here. But you also need to be on the lookout for this shot. So when you see people holding like this and they raise their arm and they play offhand, that's usually when things get dangerous, right? You can transition still. We will talk about that later. So you can still do transition shots that way. But make sure when players are inside a base and they hold like this, make sure they're not doing this stance. You can see my arm is, and they will sort of go from side to side and make shots like that. So that means when they're in like neutral, they can't be shot in the chest, right? It looks like this. So you can do transition shots from here, like when you go out and then you go back again, that's fine. But you cannot rest. Have this as sort of like your default position when you hold like this and you're like in the middle of the base, holding both entrances. It's not allowed. The reverse grip looks sort of like this. Here it's important that this arm is tucked to the body. When you do your shots, you stay with your arm here. The most common, I would presume, is shots like this. Like if I do this, I can gain like a lot of ground, and you can't shoot my chest because my arm is active. It should look like this. And you also have people making shots where they move their weapon away from their body. Looks like this. Also not allowed, because when I do that when the opponent comes into the base or to the wall, and he can't shoot me, I can shoot him. Also a very common thing to look out for. Weapon dodge, as it's called, it's actually putting your weapon in front of a sensor in order to get a stun instead of a deac. So first we have what we call the army man style. So when you hold your face like that, like sort of new players do, it's not allowed. It's not very common, but what's very common is when people sort of lean over and hold their phaser, they might end up like that. And that is not allowed. The weapon should either be under or above your chest sensor. One other thing that's pretty common is when people, let's say, attack a base or charge a base, they will sort of flick their phaser in front of their chest, or just straight up park it in front of their chest by running up to the base in order to catch a stun, instead of getting deactivated, so to speak. It's also a common way to escape. Maybe if you play Elim and you get stunned, you can sort of put your phaser like that to not get deactivated on the second shot. So be on the lookout for that. So we will now demonstrate a little bit about dodging when stunned. So a lot of players, when they get stunned, they will release their phaser and hold with just one hand. And they will either swing showing their back or their chest. And when they do, it's important to see that the arm doesn't come across the sensor. When doing that, something like that, yeah, for the chest. And then some people do that. That is something, there's no reason at all to do this move. That's warnings, both of them. Awesome. Okay. So we will now talk transitional movement. That is the most complicated bit, I think, for most. So transitional movement is when you move from one spot that is not covering to another spot that is not covering. And while doing that, you will pass by your sensor, but it's still legit. So it can be done from down here to up, or from here to down again. That is 100% legit, unless you are very slow when you do it, or you do halfway and then up. So even though you can actually block your shot when you do something like this, it's legal. Just make sure you don't see people doing this. It's not uncommon that people do. And the second transitional movement, which is the one that's very tricky, is what's called a reach shot. It's based on the notion that if I stand here and if I want to shoot behind this wall, I will have to do this, right? So I will have to cover at some point when I do my shot. And if I'm even closer, I can't really, I have to make a smaller reach, right? So a reach shot is a transitional movement that is okay, but you have to return to where you face, to a place where you don't cover with your arms. For instance, when we talked about this move, right? If you stand like this, it's covering. If I stand like this, it's not covering. If I make a shot like this, I might end up covering a little bit, but it's fine because it's a reach shot. Stupid reach shot. It should be like this. But you always have to come back. If I stand and I shoot here, I have to come back here. I can't just stay like this, shooting, doing this weird ass, that some people do. You're actually not really changing much. So you can reach and then go back again. And it goes for any situation where you have people running to get into a base and they do like this while running up to the base. They can't run like this. This is not reaching if you run all the way up to the base like this. However, if you run up to the base and then you put your shot in and then you go back again, it's what we call a reach shot. You have to be allowed to do reach shots. So for reach shots, what's never a reach shot is when you pull your facer backward. I'm not, in theory, if I'm shooting past this wall, and I'm doing this, right? It looks like a reach shot. It's not a reach shot because I'm moving the facer away from where I'm shooting. It's supposed to be this. Is it a big difference in covering here compared to here? So when you see, in general, most covering comes from people walking backwards or pulling their facer backwards. Because if you go low and you do this, or if you reach and you do this, if you move your facer backwards like this, it's never a reach shot. It's never anything legal, really. If your arm comes across, it's a warning. Okay, so last bit is framing. Framing is something that's a little bit different all over the world. Some countries, like Australia, they're very strict with the framing. Some countries like America, they're more lenient with the framing, and I would say Sweden is somewhere in the middle. This will be framing according to the Swedish way of playing. Europe can differ a little bit as well. So framing is when you hold like this, and you also put your hand like this. So it looks like this, something. So, as always, when it comes to a low hold, your hand can be somewhere to here, I suppose. Hard for me to tell when the arm is in the way. When this arm comes in the way of this sensor, then you're arming. Okay. But what's different with framing is that you also need to keep track of this arm as well. So not only is it how far this arm goes here, it's also how far back you lean, because it's very common to combine. So if I lean like this and you can't really see because this is in the way, and this is from a 0 degree angle, it's not from a shot that goes like this, but from a shot like that. So if I lean back, so my arm is in the way, that's a warning. So there are some moves, two moves in particular we need to check for. It's when someone rushes maybe into a base or into a duel and they do this, that is an arm. This is fine, not fine. And then you have what we call the roll frame, or it actually has no name. It's when you do the frame and you roll as well. And when you roll, this arm tends to move out a little bit. So it sort of looks like this, and now my chest is it's gone, I hope. Yeah. So even though you can sort of static hold it like this a little bit and do a slight lean, as soon as you do it a very aggressive move, This arm, even if you don't lean much, this arm comes in the way, or if you lean back, this arm will be in the way. And what's also important to notice is that a lot of times you manipulate the pack. You see, when you push with this arm, the pack moves, and that's not allowed either. So, something to look out for. So we will now talk a bit about bases. And first, I'd like to go through this. This is a no-stop zone for deactivated players. And it's unique for Sweden. I know some countries are experimenting with it as well, but we are using it and not everyone is, so I would like to just explain how it works. So it basically means that if you are deactivated, you cannot stand in this area. You have to move away. Let's say if you die on the baseline going in, you have to instantly get out of the way. You cannot stand here because you risk being in the way of the game. Right. So you're allowed to pass through it. Let's say I come walking here and I go like this, and I'm dead. That's fine because I'm not stopped. If I want to go in and I time it correctly, let's say it's 1 second I go and here I wake up and I continue in, that's fine. Totally legit. But if I time it wrong and I go and I have to stop, warning. So it's a way of keeping this, keeping the entrance of the bases free from dead players just standing in the way, more or less. So just to clarify, if I stand here and I'm dead and I realize that this is not a good place to stand, I can just move here, it's fine. That's a-okay. Still, as the other rules say, if I want to switch side, I go here and I'm in the way, I get a warning anyway, because that goes under another rule called corking, or just being in the way of a player trying to get in. Or give way for the activity. There's like a lot of rules covering that. So this is just to reduce traffic in front of the base. So the baseline, which I hope I don't have to explain to a lot, is supposed to be regarded as a wall and not just a line. So when I wake up, I have to be outside of the baseline with my entire body and facing. So if I wake up and I'm here, I'm over the baseline because facer is crossing the baseline. So this would be being across the baseline, and this would be being across the baseline as a deactivated player, and you're not allowed to be inside the base area when you are deactivated, and you have to wait until you're active before you go in. There is one exception, even though it's not in the books. If you run towards the base, you get shot in the back, take one last step, and then you move away. There's no way to stop that from happening, so we are lenient on that part. However, if you die, let's say I die here and I continue into the base like this, I'm not aware that I'm dead, I'm not in control of my pack and my game, and I'll get a warning. So, when you're inside the base and you get deactivated, you have to exit the base. It's called an evac. When you evac, you must take the long way out, as Felix is demonstrating, and then exit safely. And if it feels unsafe to exit, you can choose not to evac and remain in the base. If you have to remain inside the base, it's common to raise your arm so that the referees know that, yes, I'm aware that I'm dead, but for safety reasons or not interfere with the game, maybe the base is under attack, something like that, I opt out on exiting. And if a player wakes up inside the base holding their arm up, they're of course not allowed to shoot unless they first exit the base and then come back in again. When you're inside the base and you get deactivated, you must never take the short way out, because people might be running in or wanting to have your spot turning the quick corner. So the safest way to exit is to move towards the back wall and the center back wall, and then exiting the long way out. So when taking the base, there are a few rules to know. When you take the base, your facer must be inside the base. Your whole body doesn't have to be inside, which goes for some other countries, but here, only phaser has to be inside the base. The thing is, the covering rules when you take the base is different from anywhere else in the arena. Usually when you shoot, you have what you call a leading arm, which is facing where you're shooting, and that's the arm you cover with. If you cover with the other arm, it's actually what's called an off-angle covering, and it's not covering. It's only your leading arm that covers unless you do this intently. However, when you shoot the base, both arms count, and that's very important to think about. So let's say if I'm holding this all good, you know, and then I go for shooting the base, and I do this when I shoot the base. You see, even though this is my leading arm now because I'm shooting this way, this arm is covering, and because I'm shooting the base, both arms matter. Okay, so that's important to keep track of as a referee. So a lot of times, because the common scenario is that someone comes from this way trying to shoot me, that's why I have to shoot it in a correct manner when I shoot the base with both arms. And this is the only instance when you look at both arms as a referee. In that regard, like people can exploit it on the arena, and that's one thing, but you know, your average day scenario, that's how it goes. Also, when shooting the base, as Felix will demonstrate, you're not allowed to do the weapon dodge. So when shooting, you cannot have your phaser like this. It happens on occasion, because anyone coming from this side of the base will not deactivate the player tagging the base. You just get a stun, and it's a normal. You're correct. Another common thing is when people sit down to shoot the base. You see, and the phaser is parked in front of the chest. It has to be under the chest or above the chest when shooting. Yep. And also, when people sit down, make sure that their arm is not covering towards the door, which is actually not very uncommon, because both arms matter.